Alright. Start by answering I'm the 2020 State Achievement Award winner for food and nutrition. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Brown County. Christy is my extension educator. This is my 8th year in 4-H and my 8th year in foods projects. I'm a little experienced. And when I'm not doing 4-H, I like to run cross country or be a part of my high school band and numerous other things. I'm going to kind of take you through what's required of all food and nutrition projects throughout the state. I know some counties require different things. My county requires a menu, except for this year, but this is the main thing that for all project judgings around the state. So we'll start with your project book. Some of my tips and tricks. Make sure you complete all the required activities and recipes. Like Christy had said earlier, don't leave anything empty. If possible, do any extra activities. They never hurt. Sometimes they give you like additional projects that you can research or another activity you can do. They're always good for experience. Another tip is to read the whole book, even those little safety tips or extra information boxes. Your judges pull questions from your projects books, so it's very important that you don't miss anything. Read and complete your activities and any other sections of your interest area, which are the sections in your books, before you make the recipe. A lot of the times there's little paragraphs and then the activities are before the recipe. That way you know what you're doing before you go into the recipe. It helps a lot. Another tip is to study really hard. I almost treat my project books and judging like it's a test. When it comes down to like the week of the judging, I read my book in and out a couple different times to make sure I know everything. And don't be afraid to get your book a little dirty. I know she talked about like using one color ink and stuff like that. That's important. But with cooking, it's always like your book is going to be in the kitchen with you, and it's okay to get that like food stain on it or anything. The judges know that you used it, obviously, if it's there. So studying your book, like I said, I treat it like a test. I memorize like important terms and concepts. A lot of the times they'll be like bolded in your books, or they'll define them. Those are really important to remember because a lot of the times those are what your judge will ask you about. I recommend having a friend, a sibling, a parent test you on your book. Just give them their book and say, hey, go through this with me. Anything that jumps out to you that you think might be a judging question, ask me and see if I know it. Read through the entire book a couple times before judging. Like I said, the week of, the day of, I read it a couple times just so that everything's fresh in my mind. Sometimes books have a glossary or a section in the back with like important terms that if they're bolded throughout, they're usually in the back. And you can find them with their definitions. And now I had those more when I was like in the beginner or intermediate phase, but if your book has them, definitely use them. It helped a lot. Like I said, a lot of your questions asked in judging come from your book, and there are a lot of like definitions or knowing what something is. So the more you remember, the more you study, the better prepared you are for your judging. The next thing is your portfolio. I always say to make your portfolio fun, make it personal, but also make it informational. My portfolios tend to be all different colors and different images, always very colorful. Make sure it's not just pictures or not just text or your writing. Make sure you have a mix of both. I think it's very important. And judges love to see pictures of what you made or you cooking. So portfolios are just as much for the judge as they are for you. In my experience, I like to use my portfolio as a talking point. A lot of the times you get into judging and they're like, all right, take me through your project, show me your portfolio. And so you just go by flip page and explain to them what you do. And a lot of the times, if you forget something, if you put it in your portfolio, you can kind of use that as a reminder, use it as a talking point. That way I don't forget as much, because I know for me, a lot of the times I'll get out of judging and be like, oh, this was interesting. I could have told them about this, or this was funny, or this didn't work and this did. And it would have been a good thing to talk about with the judge. That's why I like to use my project book or my portfolio and put as much information in it as I possibly can. Um, for pictures, I've always thought that pictures of you cooking yourself are better than just posting or putting pictures of the food that you made. It gets harder as you get older. I know for me, the past couple years, a lot of my photos that are in my project books have just been of my food, because I cook by myself at home sometimes. But if possible, I always try to get like a parent or someone to take a picture of me while I'm cooking, because they look a lot better and it shows the judge you in the kitchen, which they like a lot. So here are some of my examples of my portfolios. Um, there's 2 pages from each one. So like the Global Gourmet is my cover, and that was my project from last year. And then you can see one of my interest area pages below it. I started a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I started including the food safety tips and like the did you knows in my portfolios, and I would summarize them and put a little box of what I learned from them in there, because a lot of the times those are interesting things to talk about. Sometimes they are questions that your judge asked about. So if you go through your portfolio and you've seen that and then they ask that question later, you know the answer. Um, and then I have 2 text box on each of my pages usually. One is about the activity that I did, and the other is about the recipe that I made. And in each of the text box, I usually just explain what I did and what I learned. And that way, when I'm talking to the judge, if I forget something, I can always look down and see, oh, I said this, and that'll remind me to talk about it. So you see my Global Gourmet, I like to have a theme with each of my projects, whether it's a color or just like a background, different things. So with Global Gourmet, I included the flag from each of the countries that was the interest area in each of my pages. And then the cover is like the globe with a chef's hat on it. The next one is my project from 2 years ago, which is You're the Chef. That year, my centerpiece was yellow, like lemons and flowers, and my place setting was like yellow and lemons. So I like to keep like the theme the same. So I went with yellow that year. A lot of the times I'll include like little clip arts. You're the Chef took you through a lot of different utensils or equipment to use in the kitchen. So each of my pages usually had like a clip art of the item I was using. Like that one was an oven meal, so I had the clip art of the oven. There was microwave, there was stovetop, different things like that. I have pictures of my food. Again, like that was the year that I was cooking at home a lot by myself, so I couldn't get pictures from my family members taking them of me. And then I have my activities in my meal, just again like the other one. My third one is Racing the Clock to Awesome Meals. This is probably my favorite project book. It's from when I won my clock trophy, and I really think that my effort paid off with this one. This one I probably had the most information packed into. You can see like the safety tips, the did you know are in there. My food is in there. This page was about MyPlate, and in my book it was My Pyramid because it hadn't been updated yet. So I included pictures of both, and then I talked about what I had learned, what I had made. Um, that's important with all of them. I would always include what you made, what you learned from it, your activity, what you did, what you learned from it. That's like the biggest thing that that's like the staple thing of any of my portfolios. They all have that. They all differ in some sort of way, but they all include that. The with portfolios, you can do them any sort of way. These are all made through PowerPoint or Google Slides. I like to make them that way and then have them printed off and put them into binders and use them horizontally. My first couple years, I did do like vertical in binders. You can do them in folders. It really doesn't matter. I like to get crazy and intricate with my designs. You don't have to, as long as you have the information and you make it personal and you make it you. Like, that's all that matters. This was my second year project book. I had just used like stickers, and then I had like photos of me and then text. Obviously, my style has changed a lot through the years.
Olivia,
But
if you were holding something up, your video is off.
Okay, cool. So it's just I was just holding up one of my project books, but in my first couple years, I only had like just pictures of me and then like just a paragraph of text. So my style has changed a lot. But like the main point is just make it you, make it personable, the information in there. Like I said, it's as much for you as it is for the judge. So, whatever you want to put in it to make sure that you get your points across, whatever you want the judge to see, put it in there. So this is kind of a little activity, like what picture do you think would look better in in your portfolio? Which one would the judge like to see? If you take a guess, you can put it in the chat. These are kind of easy.
So you can unmute yourself to answer or put it in the chat.
The girl.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple responses or in people talking like the one with the girl is better. Either way, like I showed you portfolios where it was just the food, and I'm still successful in my projects even though it's like that. Sometimes you can't always get the person in it, but I personally like when I am in the picture better, and I think judges like that a lot better too, but you can only do what you can do. This is a little show you how portfolios are. The blue one is from my Global Gourmet project, and then the other one is just a slide I had put together for pictures from like all of my projects throughout the year. So obviously, like one of them probably isn't going to look best when you go into judging, and it's not going to provide you with much information to continue your conversation off of. You would want to use one like this one. It gives a little bit closer of the thing, but it's full of information. Sometimes I think my portfolios are a little packed full. They could be a little less chaotic, but that's just my style. But you want to make sure they're fun and cool. So the last part of judging that's incorporated in all counties and on the state level is MyPlate. And it was obviously like when I started it had just switched from MyPyramid to MyPlate. MyPlate is very informative, and I put the link on here, and you can just search it on the internet to go to their website. I encourage everybody to create an account, and I did this when I was younger to figure out how much of each food group I should have. That way you can tell your judge that. I know as a beginner project, you have to know like the basic amount of each food group that you should have. But if you create one of these accounts, it's a little more personable, and it'll tell you how much you need. And that's sometimes a little bit different than the average person based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. Make sure you know the information that's required for your project level, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I know for beginner level, it's, how much of each food group and what food group. I know intermediate, you need to know a little bit more, and I think you need to know about certain like vitamins and things like that, and fiber, stuff like that, nutrients. And I think advanced gets a little bit tougher. You have to know which nutrients come from each food group and different things like that. It should be included in what you get from your county that tells you what's required of you. It does get harder and harder, but I think MyPlate is like the best platform to learn from. It has basically everything you need to know. On my county level, I know that they just ask me questions about MyPlate, and then when you get to state fair judging, there's usually an activity where you have to answer questions based off of a place setting or different things to know which one's better for you and things like that. Another tip for this is just kind of like your project book to memorize. And for me, that's pretty easy, but I know for other people it's not. But my best tip is just to memorize and like go over it and over it so that you don't forget. Your judges pull questions from MyPlate. So that's the thing that you need to know. So this is kind of just like a little thing with MyPlate to see how much you guys know. Which one of these would be better and which one does MyPlate recommend? See if you can tell the difference. Another thing with MyPlate is they usually send out like a piece of paper that has like the MyPlate like 10 food tips or something like that. Those are really important to know as well. And that's kind of where I pulled this from, is like with different food groups, there's like tips that they have, like for grains. You're supposed to make half your grains whole grains, which is the one that's on the right. So obviously like that one would be better. For fruits, this is another one. Which one is better, the orange or the orange juice. This is something that like you need to know as well. Yeah, for this one, the actual orange is better. When you get the juice, a lot of things come out of the orange and you don't get the full thing. So the best source for all of your vitamins and minerals that come out of oranges is for you to eat the fruit. And that's the same for like all fruits. So like knowing MyPlate, knowing what amount you should have of each food group, reading those like 10 food tips are really important. Like they're staples, like make half your grains whole grains, make your protein lean, eat green leafy vegetables, drink like 1% skim milk. What am I missing? Just those things are important because those will be asked in judging as well. Lastly, judging.
Olivia, you have just over 5 minutes, or just under 5 minutes left.
Okay. My last thing is judging and interview skills. For me, always start out by shaking hands, which isn't really good for this year, but in the past, I've always started out by shaking hands and introducing myself, saying hi. Another thing that I've learned is to always be confident in your judging. Even if you don't know the answer to the question, answer it confidently. Say, I don't know this one, or, I don't know this information at that time. I know one year when I was really young, I had a judge who, I think I was the only one in the project, but she had been judging advanced projects and I was a beginner project. And so she didn't know too much about my book, and I hadn't remembered something or forgot that it was in my book, and she asked me about it, and I said, I don't think that's in my book. And she believed me because I was confident in myself, even though I went home and found out it wasn't my book. But the point of that is like stay confident even if you're nervous. I'm always shaky before I go into judging, but I always try to be as confident as possible and make eye contact with your judge. Don't like stare at the ground. Don't look at the plate. Don't do that. If you make eye contact, they can like clearly see that you're confident, you're prepared, things like that. Another thing is to speak clearly, not to mumble so that they can't hear you. It's very important, and it makes you look like a good interviewee, a good project person, if you can speak clearly, make eye contact, and be confident in yourself. And be personable, not robotic. Like, I know I've said like memorize and things like that, but don't be a robot and just spit off facts. You know, tell them about your project, what went wrong. Like, even though something may not have went right, they're not going to count that against you. I've had a lot of times where my judge laughs with me about like things that have gone wrong in my project, and they like to hear those stories and like hear how you redeemed yourself or things like that. And last thing is like, remember to have fun. It's not meant to be something that you stress over a lot. It's not meant to bring you hardship, like things like that. It's all meant to be fun and create good life experiences. So that's all I have for my presentation. I have taken 7 food projects in the past, and I think from reading what the projects that you guys are taking this year, I can answer some questions if you have questions about your project or just foods projects in general. So if you guys have questions, you can tell me now.
So you can unmute yourself or you can type them in the chat box, but we have about 2 minutes left in our breakout room.
So like this was the my second year project book that I was talking about earlier. I had it vertical. There's like stickers everywhere. There's like 3 pictures and then a little paragraph. And this is one of my more recent ones from a couple years ago. They're a lot different. They're a lot more colorful.
Lift your binder up.
They don't have to be this elaborate. Oh, sorry. They don't have to be this elaborate. I kind of get extra with my portfolios. I like designing them. It makes me happy. So whatever like makes you guys happy with your books. I'll show you guys one of my project book that is literally falling apart. Like, and I took it into judging like this. They don't really mind. They know that it's been in the chin. It's been through it. You know, my reading or my writing is readable. That's a good thing. Is make sure, like, even if there's stains in your book or it's falling apart, make it what they're reading in it is readable. That's another thing.
This is your last chance to ask Olivia questions at this time. So if anybody has any, again, you can unmute yourself or you can add those to the chat box.